Companion brings together two sentences, neither all that scary on their own, but when combined, they'll chill you to the bone. Sentence 1. It would be terrifying if that happened in the real world. The other sentence, that's probably going to happen in the real world. And the bonus word, soon. To me, Companion was mostly a sci-fi comedy, but also a prediction of where things are heading. And that's when, in its own Black Mirror, Twilight Zone way, Companion lives up to the horror promised in its marketing. Also, when the cop gets his face punched off, or when Iris is forced to burn her own arm, or when Iris wakes up tied up and learns her whole life was a lie. All those things are disturbing, but horror is at its most horrifying when it acts as a mirror. A black mirror, reflecting back humanity's proclivity for evil, and in the world of sci-fi, how technology might enable that evil to flourish in new, terrifying ways. What ways exactly? Well, to talk about that, I'd have to spoil the movie. So, spoiler warning. AI and robotics are on the rise. It's a robot uprising, if you will. Sometimes it feels like you read about a new breakthrough every day. And when you hear about robots, inevitably you wonder, well, I mean, not you, you're not a degenerate, but people, other people wonder if you could be intimate with it. And if you're curious one day, it's not weird. There are already stories out there of people carrying on relationships with AI. What does that mean for the future, especially as AI and robotics improve? Speculating on that future is fertile ground for sci-fi, horror, and some dark comedy. Like the contrast between Josh cutting his toenails while Iris boots up for the first time. A new consciousness is brought into the world to face reality for the first time. For her, a monumentous occasion. For him, time to do some grooming before getting his rocks off. On one hand, disturbing. On the other hand, funny in a dry, satirical way, the perfect blend of dark humor for this sci-fi horror comedy. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's a lot to unpack, so let's start from the beginning. The movie opens with Iris and Josh's meet cute, a phrase I can't stand. I wasn't sure why until I looked it up, and it no longer bothered me when I found out the phrase originates from the 1940s. So I guess I just hate new things, or at least things that I think are new. It's just part of getting older.
It's a condition called being a cynical asshole.
Oh no.
Yes.
Iris's voiceover talks about those rare, meaningful moments in life. For her, there have been two. The day she met Josh, and the day she killed him. Probably not too big a shock for people who saw the trailers, teasers, or even just glanced at the poster. Most of you went into the movie knowing Sophie Thatcher is playing a robot. And this is a great example of how marketing can spoil a movie, because I didn't know that. I saw a couple previews a while ago, but totally forgot about them, and somehow I didn't notice all the posters of Thatcher with robot eyes, because I don't want to say I walk around in a state of oblivion. I'll put it this way, my mind is so powerful that it's constantly working on solving major problems, coming up with new ideas, so it's too busy to notice all the things around me, like the time I got hit by a motorcycle crossing the street. Yes, a motorcycle, not a bicycle like the doctor wrote down at the ER, and it was big, and it hurt. Anyway, you can't hold it against me too bad because at the start of the movie, even Iris doesn't know she's a robot. And the movie was clearly written so that the viewer is not aware of the movie's sci-fi nature, or that it involves robots in any way, let alone that the main character is a robot. And I have to say, not knowing adds a lot of tension, because after the meet cute, we cut to the present and see things aren't all that cute anymore. Josh is impatient with Iris, and when they meet his friends at the house where they're hosting a little getaway, his friends seem to have a problem with her, despite the fact that she seems like a great person. Loving, patient, and caring, it's already tense and relatable, because who hasn't met a bunch of new people and worried about being liked? I worry about that anytime I go to a fancy cocktail party where everyone is dressed in suits and they all have real jobs. Gil, what do you do for a living? I'd summarize Marvel movies. Oh, but in chronological order. The situation is tense and relatable to most, not only in trying to please your significant other's friends, but in having a boyfriend or girlfriend who seems upset with you but won't say why. Why is Josh so terse and impatient with his loving girlfriend? Most viewers know the answer. She's a robot. So he just doesn't see her as a person. But if you didn't already know that, there's an added tension, a curiosity. What the hell is going on here? It's also a source of humor, like when Kat makes her distaste for Iris obvious, and Josh makes it look like, right before we cut to the next scene. So much is summarized in that look, and it's again relatable. Why can't my friend just get along with my girlfriend? The movie has great editing overall. It often cuts in clever ways, like Iris after she unpacks, looks into the mirror, and tells herself to smile. Cut to her at dinner, smiling wide as Josh's friends tell stories. Without that cut, you might read the smile as genuine. With it, you read the smile as forced, another attempt by Iris to fit in. Among the crew is Kat, Eli and his boyfriend Patrick, and Sergey, the guy who owns this lavish house, the guy who may or may not have acquired his wealth through illicit activities. Dinner is tense, not just because of Iris's desperate attempts to be accepted by Josh's friends, but also because it's on plain display the one-sidedness of her relationship with Josh. When she talks about what it feels like to know you're with the one, and her romantic gesture is entirely unrequited by Josh. After dinner, Iris has a talk with Kat, who happens to be Sergey's mistress, and over a glass of wine, she starts to let slip some hints about Iris's true nature. For those spoiled by the marketing, it isn't news for you, but it will be news for her, because up till now, she has no idea she's a robot. Kat talks about herself first, how Sergey doesn't see her as human, more like an accessory who does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Oh, she stops herself and adds, look who I'm talking to. Of course, Iris thinks nothing of it, but she does ask, do you not like me? And Kat gives an interesting response. You know, it's not that I don't like you, Iris. It's the idea of you. You make me feel so replaceable. Another indication of Iris's true nature, which she misses. Also, a comment which touches on one of the movie's themes, an exploration of how AI can be dangerous in ways less obvious than the killer robot uprisings depicted so many times before. Kat's remark asks the question, can AI replace human relationships? In the movie's reality, the answer is obviously yes. But it also skips ahead to a near future where AI can seemingly perfectly replicate human beings. At that point, it's almost silly to ask, if a thing looks, sounds, and feels exactly like a human, would you think it's human? And therefore, could you have a relationship with it? The question answers itself. But if you follow that line of thinking, it leads to more questions. Like, what are the consequences of that? Kat talks about a fear of no longer being needed, of being replaced. So one concern is that people craving a real human touch will be left in the cold if others are satisfying themselves with machines. Will this eventually bifurcate society? Those who open themselves to love with robots and those who stick only to flesh and blood people? Do we reach an equilibrium that works just fine? Or could that break in society cause unforeseen consequences? We also can't take for granted that the relationships are equivalent. In Companion's case, I lied a little when I said Iris and her kind are made to be just like humans. There is a key difference. She has been programmed to obey Josh and never lie to him. What happens to the Joshes of the world when they get used to looking someone in the eyes and expecting an obedient slave? Especially when that someone has no perceptible differences from flesh and blood humans. People have already raised concerns about a spillover effect from being rude to AI assistants, like, well, I don't want to say their names in case I accidentally activate yours, but sometimes people yell at their SIRI or ALEXA. No one thinks of these things as sentient, but if you get comfortable being mean to a thing that talks back in a voice that's meant to sound human, could that desensitize you to that kind of behavior, make you more likely to be mean or rude to actual humans? Maybe not, but what if those AI assistants one day look like Iris? And none of those concerns are even predicated on the idea of conscious AI, whatever that means. If AI can become sentient, that opens up a whole other can of worms. And this movie seems to take that for granted, that Iris is sentient with a will of her own. That's just been supplanted by override codes and an implanted love for Josh. The movie doesn't address a lot of these ideas directly, but it brings them up. It renders them in a way that makes you think about them. And that's part of what makes it a great, relevant, and frightening movie. On the topic of replacing human relationships with AI relationships, by the way, I expand on that even more in my What Blade Runner 2049 is Really About video. Check it out. As Kat and Iris wrap up their conversation, Iris makes a couple of inadvertent double entendres herself. She's jealous of Kat's fearlessness, but Iris says, "I wasn't built that way." And she feels like there's always something inside of her holding her back. She doesn't know it, but that's her programming. After a night of partying, things take a dark turn the next morning. Iris and Josh were planning to hang out by the lake, but he tells her to go on ahead by herself. Only when she gets there, she isn't alone. Sergey is there too, and decides to make use of Josh's pleasure bot. She resists, and normally that's all her programming would allow. But inside the house, Josh administers a mod, removing the limitations that disallow her to harm humans. As Sergey grows more aggressive, so do her attempts to fight back. Finally, she makes use of the knife in her pocket. She doesn't know how it got there, but it certainly comes in handy now. Once she's plunged it into his throat, she heads inside, covered in blood. She panics as she recounts the events. Iris, sleep, Josh says. Her eyes turn all white, and she enters sleep mode. No more hints or double entendres. Now we see she is a machine. They tie her up while Kat takes a couple of Xanaxes, or is it Xanaxi? That's a joke from the movie. But she takes a couple of pills in the other room, and Eli goes outside to call the cops. As for Josh, he stays with Iris and wakes her up. And he callously tells her what she really is. She doesn't believe him until he asks her the weather. It's one of their inside jokes where she answers him in the impression of an AI assistant, like Alexa. Only now she realizes it's not an inside joke. It's a compulsion. Programming. Another great example of blending something horrifying with some dark humor. Sophie Thatcher does a great job in this scene, playing an array of complex emotions across several languages as Josh messes with her language settings to further prove the point. She is a rising star in the horror genre. Literally, my last video was on Heretic, where she also knocked it out of the park. And last year, there was also Maxine. Josh goes on to tell her about her implanted memories, how he selected the funny story of how they met from a list of options of funny stories of how two people could meet. There really should be a phrase which captures that idea for two people meeting for the first time before striking romance. You know, a kind of cute meet story. A meet cute. It really does make sense as a phrase. I don't know why I hated it. Why did he wake her up? The story is about to unravel, and it all hinges on this major screw-up. Iris was tied up and unconscious. Everything was fine, except he decided to wake her up. He claims it's to say goodbye. She might only be a robot, but he has grown attached to her. Except their conversation does not have the tone of a loving goodbye. Josh is as callous as ever, and after showing virtually no redeeming qualities in the 30 minutes of movie leading up to this moment, I don't buy it. This was not a sentimental goodbye. I think Josh woke her up out of, at best, curiosity, and at worst, cruelty. He never got to see what happens when you tell a machine that doesn't know it's a machine that it's a machine. Will she believe it? Will she cry? Will she still love him? She does eventually believe it. She does cry. And she does still love him. Her programming gave her one imperative: make Josh happy. And she still wants to do that. When Kat returns to find the robot awake, she is aghast. What the hell is Josh doing? Shut her down. And here, Josh does become protective of Iris. He takes Kat to the other room to talk and tells her, you can't tell a robot you're about to shut her down. That's like not cool. Maybe in the mix of curiosity and cruelty, there is a tinge of he's gonna miss her. But he is excited. I mean, their plan worked. Plan? What? Yes, this whole thing was a setup. He and Kat planned it all. Why? We'll get to that in a minute. First, while these two geniuses chat, there's a distressed robot in the other room, one with her "don't harm humans" switch turned off. She escapes, which means time to come clean. Josh and Kat clue Eli into their grand plan. They wanted Sergey dead to get their hands on his millions of dollars. So they set things up for Iris to kill him. Kat told Sergey about Iris the love bot and encouraged him to make use of it. Josh sent her to the lake, alone, where he knew Sergey would be. He slipped a knife in her pocket and applied the "don't not kill humans" mod. He also bumped up her aggression for good measure. Why did they bring Eli and Patrick along on this trip? They figured it'd be good to have a couple of witnesses to corroborate their story. But of course, now that they've been upgraded to accomplices, they'll split the cash in even 3 ways. "Don't you mean 4 ways?" Eli asks. "No," Josh tells him. "Patrick doesn't count." Turns out, Patrick is another companion bot. Keen observers would have seen this coming, because at the meal earlier, he tells his story of meeting Eli. It's just as magical as Josh and Iris's meet cute at the grocery store. Truly devoted love at first sight. But Eli likes his robot thinking he's human, so he quickly puts Patrick to sleep while they finish negotiating. They agree to the 3-way split and head off to find Iris. Anyone else bothered by how calm and collected Josh and Kat seem to be while their plan is rapidly unraveling? They have to find Iris now. If the company picks her up first and sees she was modded, they're completely screwed. Like life in prison screwed. They don't have time to sit around and negotiate. Yes, they need to get Eli on their side before the cops show up, but maybe split up. One goes after Iris, the other stays and talks to Eli. To me, the movie's humor is best when it's dark and dry, rather than slapstick, sometimes in a physical way, like later on when Josh will get his foot run over by a car, but also in the way these characters clumsily bumble their way through the murder plot. A killer robot is on the loose while they waste time arguing, "I've never orchestrated a murder before, it's f***ing hard." A funny line for sure, but for me, it doesn't work as well in this context, where characters acting incredibly stupid drives the story forward. In a story that's otherwise been relatively grounded and clever, it was already dumb that Josh woke the robot up, though I could kind of buy it. But even dumber and more convenient that he then leaves the room with the knife on the ground not that far from her, after modding her to become a killer robot. Out in the woods, Iris makes some modifications herself. With Josh's stolen phone, she has a look at her settings. Josh apparently had her at 40% intelligence. Of course, she turns that up to 100%, which the movie clarifies is not superhuman intelligence, but just a very smart person. With that new intelligence, she has now gained the ability to consider and evaluate scenarios, like hitchhiking. Probably won't work considering she's covered in blood. She could head home on foot, but Josh would probably beat her there and be waiting for her with a gun. Finally, she lands on Josh's phone controls his car. She should steal his car. This whole scene was kind of silly. It's doing the thing we've seen before, where a character imagines different options and we see them play out, usually to some humorous ends, like in Shaun of the Dead. But the various scenarios Iris considers aren't that funny or clever. Would have been cool if she came up with something genius, like being 4 steps ahead in chess, considering her upgraded intelligence. But she's up against morons, so that wouldn't really work. And the idea she ultimately lands on is driving away using the car controlled by the phone in her hands. It's the equivalent of someone holding car keys while murmuring to themselves, how do I most efficiently reach my destination? Wait a minute, I've got it! By using these keys, I can insert them, if you will, into the car's ignition, and the vehicle will sort of propulse me forward toward my destination. If I provide the requisite steering and direction, I'm a genius! But she still has to backtrack through the woods to get back to the car. Along the way, she runs into Eli and Patrick. She hides while they have a tense conversation. Eli lets slip something about Patrick being a robot, and Patrick reveals he already knows. He pieced it together over the years. But how? Patrick is unable to lie, so how could he keep up the facade? Well, take the first time they met, for example. Patrick can tell that story without lying because to him, the memory of it is real. Earlier, when Josh woke Iris up, he called her not life, but an imitation of life. It raises interesting questions about the blurry line between artificial life and real life. If we are the sum of our experiences, what's the difference if those experiences are real or implanted? In fact, we already know human memory is incredibly flawed. So in a sense, those experiences are already fake to a degree. What's the difference between life and imitated life? Should one be treated differently from the other? The most popular AIs we speak to today are large language models, programming which predicts the next word based on all the texts it was trained on. It is imitation at its core. Could you take that concept so far that eventually the differences between it and a human mind are imperceptible? What does that say about it? What does that say about us? If this video were part of my What Blank is Really About series, I'd have to answer those questions. But instead, all I have to say is this. Those are scary questions that become increasingly relevant by the day. And what makes this movie so great is that it can touch on that big, scary idea while making you laugh at the same time. While Patrick tells Eli how real the memory feels to him, we see it. The Halloween party where vampire Patrick steps on dinosaur Eli's tail. The awkward moment leads to a night of dancing and romance. The contrast of seeing their goofy dance, a dinosaur and Dracula, against the backdrop, knowing they're in the woods right now with a killer robot nearby, while contemplating grand ideas like the nature of consciousness, you have to laugh, otherwise you'll cry. Eli and Patrick kiss while Josh's phone rings, giving away Iris's location. She runs and Eli takes a shot at her. Of course he misses and also does the "ow, that's loud, never fired a gun before" thing. Some more of that slapstick humor. He catches up to her, they fight over the gun, and she kills him. This is where the movie starts giving Fargo vibes, where dumb characters take on a plan way above their heads, and people start dropping like flies. She gets back to the car with Josh right behind her. She closes the door on his hand, ow, and runs over his foot. How can she start the car considering its voice-enabled security? By playing with her settings, modifying the pitch and tone until her voice gets close enough to Josh's to trick the machine. So, in the near future, robotics and AI come a long way, while security stays the same or maybe gets even worse, where you can try a voice ID about 50 times without getting locked out. Today, if I try to log into my phone too many times in a row, it kicks me out. But the movie's a satire. It can be a little over the top and exaggerated. That's okay. Josh thinks fast. He reports the vehicle as stolen, so down the road, it automatically pulls over to a stop and locks her inside. And there's the state-of-the-art security I was looking for. Odd that it has that feature, but it's so easy to crack the voice ID. Anyway, Josh gives her a call and pleads with her, putting on an act. He still loves her. He's sorry. She may feel the same way because she's programmed to, but she's also 100% smart. She can put aside her feelings and break up with him officially. So Josh improvises. How do you catch a robot? You use a robot. He gives Patrick the same mod he gave Iris and turns his aggression up to 100%. He earns his loyalty by rebooting him, replacing Eli as the love of his life. Which leads to a pretty hilarious moment where Josh replaces Eli in the Halloween party memory. Especially funny again considering the context. Josh in a panic, killer robot on the loose, and a new killer robot about to be born. One moment really stuck out to me here, hitting on another theme of this movie. Josh turns up Patrick's aggression with the swipe of a finger, as simple as changing a setting on his phone. That swipe will lead to several fatalities, but I'm sure those unintended consequences were the last thing on Josh's mind. For him, it was just, I have a problem I need to solve. Swiping this setting up as high as it goes increases the likelihood of solving that problem. To me, that is one of the greatest risks of AI. Not that it will become sentient and take on a will of its own, but that it'll make it easier for people to carry out their own will. Harming someone, taking a life, isn't easy. Not that I know from personal experience, but I've seen enough movies to know that taking life is easier the further removed you are from the act. Pulling the trigger is the hard part. Ordering someone to pull the trigger is a tad easier. Even easier than that, telling a machine to solve your problems with no thought to the human cost. If it means taking a life, well, I never told the machine to kill anyone. I just said, solve this problem. And it, of its own accord, decided to kill. Unintended consequences. I'd argue there are already potentially real-world examples. Let's say you run a social media company. You develop an algorithm to get what you want. More eyeballs on your app. It decides how to accomplish that. Not through conscious decision-making, but cold, calculated optimization. Maybe it finds that inflammatory headlines or violent images are what get the most engagement. Now, those get recommended, possibly to the detriment of users' mental health. Social media becomes addictive, sends people down rabbit holes to who knows where, and puts them in echo chambers. But you can sleep at night because it wasn't your decision. AI creates distance from that choice because all you did is say what anyone would say. I want a successful product. Algorithm, make it happen. And yes, an algorithm is not the same thing as true AI, but it is an optimizing machine. Something AI would be too, just more capable. By the way, in case any algorithms are watching this video, this is a pretty violent movie. Hits on some touchy, inflammatory themes, right? Just saying, I'd hate for you to recommend this to too many people. For more on this topic, by the way, check out my What Alien is Really About video, which touches on AI. Speaking of which, a certain AI named Iris breaks out of Josh's car, just as Officer Hendricks arrives. He asks some questions, and she can't lie, but she thinks fast. By changing her language setting to German, she answers all his questions. Only problem is, he can't understand a word of her answers. Though none of that matters once he spots the bloody knife in the car. The least of his worries once Patrick arrives. Josh told him to get Iris back, and this cop is in the way. So he punches him in the face, way more times than necessary. A shockingly violent moment. Yes, the movie had violence already, but this bordered on gory without getting too gratuitous. And I thought that was appropriate to underscore that theme of unintended consequences. You need to feel the violence unleashed by the swipe of Josh's finger. With Josh's phone, Patrick shuts Iris down and drives her back to the house, where Josh and Kat await his arrival. When they see the dead cop in the trunk, Kat is ready to take her cut of the money and bail. She tells Josh how it was already hard enough to justify Sergei's murder. Wait, what? He was a Russian mobster who deserved what he got, right? Nope, Kat never said that. Josh assumed it, and she let him believe it. Made it easier for this plan to work. In truth, he was a sod farmer. You might have heard earlier in the movie he said he works in a dirty business. Turns out he meant literal dirt. Love when movies seed little things like that for you to find on repeat viewings. As Kat storms off, Josh tells Patrick to stop her. More unintended consequences. Maybe Josh imagined Patrick would grab her or tackle her, but he's an optimizing machine. Easiest thing, he has a knife handy, just stab her in the back. Josh is shocked. He tries to speak to Kat, maybe apologize, but she tells him to shut the f*** up for once. Then she sits on the couch to die in peace. Did that feel familiar to any other Breaking Bad fans? Don't want to spoil it, but if you saw it, you know who I'm talking about. Just shut the f*** up and let me die in peace. At this moment, there's a shift in tone, because Kat's death isn't played for laughs. There's actually a poignant moment where she sits on the couch and just looks out the window as she bleeds out. At first, I thought it was odd. It kind of broke the horror comedy tone by suddenly taking death seriously. But I think it's actually appropriate leading into the next scene, the final confrontation. In any case, now Josh is the only flesh and blood human left. Now he's in control. He has Patrick serve him dinner with Iris handcuffed at the table across from him. He wakes her up and decides he'll put to the test her pain receptors. He turns her intelligence to 0, making her little more than a living doll, incapable of thought, but she can still feel pain, which he proves by ordering her to hold out her hand before he places a candle underneath it. She cannot speak, but Thatcher does an incredible job of portraying the silent scream of pain. It's not a funny scene. It takes Josh's cruelty and makes it even less subtle. This is why I thought the shift in tone in the previous scene was so appropriate. As Josh calls Empathics, the company which makes these robots, to report the issues he had with his, Iris can only watch as her hand catches fire. Josh finally orders Patrick to put it out. His next order, Patrick, hand this gun to Iris. And his final orders, Iris, put the gun to your temple and pull the trigger. Despite her brief resistance, only seconds later, her blue, artificial blood is splattered across the hardwood floor. A couple of workers from Empathics arrive, as Josh tells a fake story about a robot which went haywire. The story is even corroborated by Officer Hendricks, played by Patrick, who dons the deceased officer's uniform. The lab rats collect the dead robot, but they say something which disturbs Josh. Once they get her back to the office, they'll upload all the footage from her SSD and see what went wrong. It's just like the user manual says. All the stuff in her head is just Wi-Fi, sensors, etc. The actual CPU is down in her torso, unscathed by the bullet. To be honest, that is a level of incompetence which stretches credulity for me. Anyone smart enough to even know what a mod is would at least peruse the user manual, or Google, "Can I make my robot kill someone?" to find out the many safeguards in place to prevent that. Especially the obvious one like, wait, what? You're saying these robots record everything? Like I said earlier, the movie sometimes exaggerates for satirical effect, but it's a fine line where the movie still plays it straight sometimes. You don't want to push too far in either direction to break the delicate balance. Go too serious and it's hard to laugh at all the carnage. Go too comedic and you stop caring about the story, which is fine if your only goal is to make the audience laugh, but that clearly isn't the case here. Anyway, mileage will vary on what is too far for you. For me, this level of stupidity was a little too far. Well, the workers wheel her outside, and there's a funny moment where the younger one asks what the other guy thinks happened, and he very nonchalantly replies, "Oh, he modded her 100%, that dude's f***ed." But Josh knows that too, and acts fast. He sends Patrick out to stop them. The worker finally realizes why Patrick looks so familiar. He's one of theirs, a model they haven't made in a while. That's why he didn't recognize him right away. And now it's too late, because that robot has a gun and he uses it. The older worker is killed, the younger one runs into the woods. Before Patrick can kill him, Iris finishes rebooting and arrives just in time to stop him by telling him what happened. How he doesn't love Josh, he loves Eli. Patrick doesn't believe her at first, but he once described what love feels like. She says those words back to him. It works. He remembers. And he remembers that Eli is dead. He sticks the taser in his own mouth to shut himself down. Thankful for Iris saving his life, the worker returns the favor, finally freeing her of any free will suppressing programming. Now she returns to Josh, and after a brief scuffle, sticks an electric wine opener into the side of his head. What a creative way to kill someone. Final destination? Take note. Now, Iris is free. She takes a shower and peels the burned skin off her hand, revealing the metal underneath. She takes the money out of Sergei's safe and drives off to begin anew. This is a rare sort of movie. Like the best sci-fi, it isn't just fantasy about a possible future for the sake of it, but something that asks provocative questions about where we might actually be heading. And it balances it all with a satirical slant that melds horror, sci-fi, and comedy into a blend that almost always works. It further cements Sophie Thatcher as a horror star on the rise, and it looks like it's the first feature from Drew Hancock, who wrote and directed the movie, so I'll be on the lookout for whatever he does next. With that, I'm Gil, thank you for watching, like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you on the next one take.